When anyone who works in the cloud sector or private industry, anyone who has any connection to networked technology today, who relies on it for the integrity of their products and services, they see that we're facing a new field of threats that's developing in unexpected ways. If I could mention to the stage, I hear a little bit of an echo of my own words. If we could clip that out, that would be great. Thank you. I apologize. Uh, the The primary challenge that we're facing is that it's difficult to defend against attackers who are so well resourced, so well coordinated, uh, that they have an advantage, a raw advantage over anything that the defenders are doing. Now, the question is, why is this the case? Now, for the longest time, when we think about general purpose computing, how it works, you give a processor an instruction and it processes. That's why they exist. And this is what gives them their value. It's what allows us to innovate. It's what allows us to do new things. And it's the way things should continue in the future. But what we haven't done is we haven't made sure that in terms of public partnership, the way our governments work, the way our industry work, that we come together to make sure that our defenses are being invested in more heavily than our offensive capabilities. Now, unfortunately, very well developed governments, we're talking about super states, the United States, Russia, China, the UK, France, Germany, these countries have significant technological resources. They have large budgets for investing in things like intelligence collection. And they saw that by weakening the security of our systems, the ones that we all rely upon, they can get an offensive advantage in terms of intelligence collection and surveillance capabilities. And this affects all of us because what they're doing is they're trying to pull down the fence a little bit to make it easier to peer over. But the problem is that is the fence that divides our private spaces, our private property, our private homes and companies from every nefarious actor that's out there. Now, these policies that have reduced the security that we feel in our standards that we rely upon and the private systems that we rely upon has brought us to a place where offense is much easier than defense. Now, fortunately, for the first time in a very long number of years, we're seeing that exploits are becoming more difficult to develop and also more expensive to develop. At the same time, attackers who risk using them, these zero-day exploits, are able to use them for a more limited period of time because defenders now, once they catch them, have gotten much better at revealing them, coordinating them, and ultimately burning them by patching them so they can no longer be used again. Slowly, step by step, by cooperating, we're able to ratchet up our level of security. Now, the problem is we still see these policy instincts to go, offense is getting harder. What's the solution to this? Is too commonly becoming, well, let's weaken defense. This is the dynamic that led to the safe harbor decision that we just saw. When you look at the safe harbor decision and you think about what the court was considering when they came to this, if you read the judgment, they say their concern was not the government's ability to affect individualized, targeted surveillance on the basis of a warrant, where the government goes in and they're precisely targeting a single individual, even if they are a user of your service, whether that's a cloud service, whether that's a data processing service, or anything else. It's not about getting target records. It's about generalized surveillance. And we see that in the Schrems decision, where when they said it was invalid, they said it was because we could no longer trust in the dynamics of national security policy that third country agencies, wherever it's being transferred, whether that's the United States or any other country, could be trusted to recognize that our fundamental rights, and these are the words of the courts, not me, that our fundamental rights are just as important as a given agency's interest in intelligence collection. Now, the way this weighed in is when you look back at the information of 2013, it revealed something fairly extraordinary, which was that it's not just hackers that we in private industry need to worry about. It's not just some kid in the basement or an adversarial group trying to steal intelligence or trying to subvert your capabilities. Now, those do exist. We've seen recently that Apple, their iStore, was actually attacked. The integrity of their ecosystem was attacked in a new and novel way because they didn't put just a particular targeted attack against the company, against the developer. What they did was they created a damaged part of the tool chain that creates the products that go in the App Store, the toolkit that the developers use when they're creating the software that your company or any other company might put in an app. They poisoned it so that any developer, any programmer who used this set of tools would then be providing poisoned apps. Now, they've mitigated this, but we see these same capabilities being used by our own governments. And this is what the court considered. They saw that our infrastructure service provider, Belgian telecommunications firms, Gemalto, the SIM card maker from the Netherlands, were being attacked not just by, for example, the United States, but even EU member states, such as the European Union. And we saw that even within the United States directly, the problem was that generalized surveillance was not simply allowed, it was actively encouraged. There were targeted programs of surveillance where, for example, through the PRISM program that you see on the bottom, the government could compel cooperation through Google or Facebook or Yahoo. But there was also a much less discussed but much more important capability called upstream. And this means your transactions that your business is engaged in, your relationships with your customers that are occurring on the internet electronically naked, and by that I mean unencrypted, could be intercepted. They could be rifled through. They could be gathered and stored and analyzed without the involvement of any court. Rather than going to a judge and showing traditionally, as you would expect in any free and liberal society, that to intrude upon your rights as a business or the individual's right as a citizen or even as a non-citizen, a basic human being, they would have to make some showing of probable cause that this individual is involved in criminal activity, some kind of wrongdoing. But that was not actually the case. Rather, they had a single government official in the United States who would write class-based authorizations that said, if you're a member of this group, any analyst, anybody sitting at a desk can make their own determination that because they think you have information of foreign intelligence value that would be useful to the operations of surveillance, that they can entitle themselves to your communications, to your activities. And that is what the Schrems decision was about. And this brings it to the answer that everyone in the room is now concerned about as we scramble for how does this affect us now that it impacts our transfer of data, is what do we do when the structures and mechanisms of trust and cooperation that we put in place internationally begin to break down? What happens when our partners are not as trustworthy and credible as we need them to be in order to do business in a proper and appropriate way? And the question is to think about what bothered the court the most when they wrote that decision and how to protect yourself in the upcoming new scheme, the new structure that will be put in place, eventually negotiated, hopefully much more quickly now, and hopefully in a much stronger and more enduring way. And that is the question of generalized surveillance, generalized transfer of information, things that aren't happening on a controlled basis. And so we have to think about, well, how does that happen? From the intelligence context, from the state context with which the court concerned itself, there are primarily two vectors by which this occurs. The first is the interception of transactions while they're in transit. And this is the most important one because it's the one you can control. And the issue for this is, as a business, encryption is becoming absolutely vital, not just for sensitive data, but for all data, any transactional data, whether it's for business purpose, whether it's ephemeral purpose. The reason why is for legal liability protection. If you encrypt your communications, between your business and your customers, you ensure that you don't have interference by outside parties, whether they are criminal groups, whether they are foreign governments, or whether they are our own. What you are doing is you're making a guarantee for the customer that you work for them rather than someone else. The other means, the other mechanism of generalized surveillance is subversion, co-option, any kind of basically compelled or voluntary engagement between the service provider and the bad actor, in this case, whoever they are trying to gather your data. Now, this you can keep track of because, of course, the government, in most cases, although we have seen departures from this, is quite unlikely to break into your data center, is quite unlikely to basically grab everything in a way that'll create large legal risks for you. It does happen, but again, it's quite rare. If you have any information security staff, that will mitigate to some extent the risk and possibility of that happening. But what you can do is think about how to structure your business, how to structure your operations in such a way that your intention as the owners of the company, as the operators of the company, as the arbitrators of the relationship between yourself and your customers, is that things happen in a manner that is consistent with the intention and operation of your industry, your structure. And this is something that has not been explored very well yet. You've seen in many spaces of law, in many spaces of policy, in many spaces of business operation, a lot of investment in ways to do this, for example, for tax purposes. When a company feels that they're being unfairly taxed, when there's money on the line for their shareholders or for their own operations, there are quite a lot of incentives. And you see they've come up with a number of clever but also controversial strategies for mitigating the risks as they perceive them. For example, they offshore profits to areas like Ireland or other countries around the world. They create subsidiary organizations and structures that they lease data sets for and transfers. The same thing can be done in the context of data. If you are operating in a hostile jurisdiction where you can't rely on the law or you're concerned about advancements in the law, you can actually place your data in a wholly owned subsidiary and place that in a jurisdiction which is much more friendly to privacy rights. You don't necessarily have to rehome every data center. You don't have to do everything like this, but the idea to think about, to invest in, to explore is this idea of jurisdictional arbitrage. Your customers rely on you to provide the best and most secure services possible. It's up to you to realize mechanisms for affecting this, for providing these guarantees in a way that is not only working today, but reliable for the future. There are also things that you can do, speaking from personal experience, to deter intelligence agencies who may want to take advantage of your business for their interests, which I would point out here, there are important programs that they do that are valuable to society. It's not that every spy agency is evil. It's that we have to remember, in many cases, their interests depart not only from corporate interests, not only from private interests, not only from the civic interest, but the broad public interest. State security is a very different concept from the public interest. And when you think about this, how can you guarantee this? You can make guarantees to your customers, for example, in your end user licensing agreement, to say, if we are challenged, if we are compelled in any jurisdiction to work contrary to the interests of our customers, we will litigate this to the highest court of appeal. You don't put yourself on the line to break the law or anything like that, but you make it clear to your customers that you are on their side, and you make it clear to any institution, whether they are a criminal organization or whether they are a organization that has the power of law, that you will do everything you can to ensure that your interests are always aligned with your customers. Now, when we think about this generalized issue of cybersecurity, when we think about these new threats, these attacks, these new compromises, and how do we address them, there are two sides. There's this policy side, there's this technical side. The technical side we need to support, we need to engage in, we need to roll out encryption as quickly and aggressively as we can, because it is the most reliable protection for communications in transit and also data at rest. There are means, if you are concerned about the processing of data, to process even encrypted data today, and they could use much more investment in research. But it is this policy level that will truly determine the future and competitiveness of your company in new and novel legal regimes. And this is something the industry has not been very good about in the last 20 to 30 years. Whereas you've seen a number of industries, whether they're involved in particularly ones that are not serving the same sort of unambiguous public or commercial purposes, but they may be controversial, things like cigarettes, alcohol, tobacco, things that could have public health risks, safety risks. They work very closely to make sure that the legislatures understand their positions and try to represent their interests. The digital industry today needs to be very clear that they represent a very large public base, and what they are building is the common fabric of community upon which the entire world is increasingly relying upon. And we have every single, municipality, every single government, every single state saying that we want you to provide this journalist's information to us. We want you not to embrace encryption because it will make this particular method of intelligence gathering more difficult for us. That you're setting a precedent every time you allow that. And if you allow backdoors for law enforcement in even a developed country where you may be very comfortable that they will abide by the rule of law, you have to do that for every country. Because when you start providing disproportionate access like that, these countries in response will restrict your market access. Fundamentally, things have to be safe for all of us if they're going to be safe for any of us. If I were to summarize the idea when we think in terms of civilizational conflict, the sort of competition for advantages and business and market that we see today, it's to remember that while governments and more specifically state security services, foreign intelligence agencies, spying groups are always going to be pressuring for more access, for more resources, for more powers, for less oversight, and for more offensive capability. Remember the fact that more broadly, outside of the agency level, we as free societies, as developed societies, as relative to the mean, rich societies have much more invested. We have much more to lose. When you think about the current context of the systems today, the research and development budgets, the operations at universities, your products and services, simply how much it costs you in terms of salary to hire a local programmer as opposed to a programmer in a developing country, defense will always provide a greater return per dollar invested than offensive capability will do this. Because if you think about what governments, what these foreign intelligence agencies and spy agencies are getting in relation to every basically intrusion, every successful hack that they do, even if you think it's furthering the interests of your particular country, your particular tribe, your particular industry, you're stealing a relative portion of whoever that adversary may be. And if your adversaries have less than you do, which is the case today in most of the developed world, each time they win, they gain more than we do each time we win. The only way we can both secure what we have today and secure a platform, a policy that will protect the rights that we ourselves inherited, the opportunities that we are able to engage in today, and the markets that we want to be able to access tomorrow, we have to create a free and fair infrastructure in which we can all engage in every country that will allow everybody to be safe and not be so focused on offense. Who won the latest attack? Because ultimately, when we think about the future, defense matters. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.